Hey guys, and welcome to MrPokke's first ever How to COSTMAX in Honkai Star Rail. Using the abilities of holy shit, Dahlia is too hot, bro. Using the abilities of COSTMAXing to frame mock the casuals as you reclaim your throne as the best HSR player in the entire world. So we have this project. I highly recommend y'all to take a peek into our Lycon tier list as well as the Eidolon tier list video right here and right here on both of our main channel. Only after finishing those two videos would I recommend you to actually watch this in order to properly COSTMAX in Honkai Star Rail. Before we proceed, you might be wondering, what is COSTMAXing? So the term COSTMAXing was made by this individual called MrPokke on the 16th of May, 11:06 p.m. in which you want to get the most efficient cost for your team upgrades to see their respective best performances at each individual level. Right now, for this particular list we are doing today, it is not going to be a tier list. It is just going to be listing out what are the priority, right? The priority eidolons and Lycons you are gonna be getting for each of these team comps for you to decide as a player. For example, right, we all know Mimo Slop is going to be a really casual friendly team. Do we kind of come that is Mimo Slop better than Phainon, or is Phainon better than Mimo Slop? That is not the objective of today's video. Today's video is simply, if you want to play Mimo Slop, which eidolons do you get, period. If you want to play Phainon, which eidolons do you get, period, right? So I will assume you are definitely gonna be having their respective best in slot characters for every single scenario. And yes, we will use a sustain unless you are a goddamn elitist. This tier list will not go through the E6. We are gonna try to cap out our cost maximum, maybe like between the 8 to 12 range. If anything goes beyond 8 to 12, then at that point you don't really need to watch this video, right? So all that being established, let's jump into our very first COSTMAXing team, and that is going to be none other than Seele. I am just gonna keep it a buck for Seele. Your team comp nowadays is extremely straightforward. Slap on a T, slap on a Ceridra. Alright, slap on a Ceridra, and you are not gonna be an elitist. Use a fucking DHPT, right? So this will pretty much be the quota. What if I sparkle? I'm sorry, guys. I was being a little silly. This is pretty much gonna be your best in slot Seele team with a sustain as of this very moment. So you might be wondering, what should be the first cost you invest in after you do this team? And the answer is honestly very simple. Number one, it will never be Seele's cost. Why? You could lose her in your 50-50s straight up. So I will never ever recommend players to ever spend their limited pools chasing for a Seele eidolon, period. So with that being established, here's where I would personally go for. Number one, that is gonna be none other than our E1 Sparkle. Where the hell is bro? This will be your number one priority in a Seele COSTMAXing situation. And the reason why you want to get this E1 Sparkle is because it pivots very well into... Chat, I just realized this video has one problem, guys. I can't have duplicates. Because if I have a thing here, I need to move this thing down to like other list. Because there's only one. You know what? We'll just do them one by one then. I can't have like a screenshot showing every single one at like the same time, so we'll just do them one by one. In any case, Seele, you will start off with a E1 Sparkle followed by an E2 Sparkle, so that is going to make up majority of where your damage is coming from. For Ceredra as well as DHPT, purely from a damage perspective, I'ma keep it about this is mainly more so you want to stack this to 100%, which honestly is very doable with Seele since bro already runs Quantum set. I'm assuming you are going to be running best on Quantum set, and combining this with 30% defense ignore from Sparkle, E1 Ceredra is going to be a significant damage increase for both the 16% defense ignore as well as the 36% defense ignore when you get the duplicate skill. On top of that, energy is always going to be really good for Seele, so I would say this E1 Ceredra will be next in slot. For DHPT's E1, this is pretty good because 18% red span is nice, but compared to 16% decent ignore up to 36, and you have energy regen, I would say this is more important from a damage perspective. And I'm gonna be a little bit more wary of running a DHPT eidolons because specific to Seele, right? Most Seele mains that I know, okay, wait, let me get my Ceredra real quick. Most Seele mains that I know, they fall under this symptom called being a motherfucking elitist, right? Seele mains are allergic to using sustains because the moment they see a sustain, they buff flip explode immediately, right? So with that sense, if you want to run Seele without a DHPT, then DHPT's E1's value then once again goes down because you want to run, for example, RMC, Babin, E1 3, whatever fuck they run nowadays. So these three will be like your first priorities in order to cost max Seele, right? From this point onwards, you might be wondering why am I not including any light cones for Seele, and that is honestly extremely simple. Let me introduce you to this light cone I call the You can run this on Sparkle, you can run this on Ceredra, you can run this on Trippy, you can pretty much just run this on any of the butter bitches you want to run in. And from a purely damage perspective, because this is such an insane light of both of our harmony sustains, DHPT being there for you to ensure you do not go buff flip explode is the reason why I won't really be recommending it by that much. And then the last cause you want to think of, okay, alright, I'm not gonna recommend, add this to like right before we start Seele. This tier list will not go through the E6. We are gonna try to cap out our cost maximum maybe like between the 8 to 12 range. If anything goes beyond 8 to 12, then at that point you don't really need to watch this video, right? Okay, back to the video. So after you get yourself the E1 Ceredra, between DHPT's E1s and S1s, I would honestly consider getting the Ceredra S1 just because it is a substantial damage increase, and because you can just use an S1 to recover 1 skill point instead of an E1 to recover 1 skill point, although you do get yourself an additional 18% red spend, but Ceredra's light cone also allows you to get 54% skill damage increase, bro, right? So for those reasons, I would then go for the Ceredra S1 if you really just want to go for the additional damage dealt, and you can forsake the S5 DDD, then DHPT if you want to leave bro at E0 S0, I personally think it's gonna be completely fine. And then from this point onwards, if you want to still run a sustain, technically speaking, E1, E2 DHPT is gonna be your next best bet, right? Because you have 18% red span, you have 1 skill point, and E2 DHPT is a really versatile support or rather sustain eidolon that you can kind of just give to almost every single team here. So E1 into E2 should be the last priority, but if you use DHPT a lot with other team comps, you could consider getting this a little bit earlier just for the versatility. So with that, we've come to the end of our Seele cost maxing guide right here. Moving on into the next cost maxing, and that is going to be DOT. Right, for the DOT team comp, I'm just gonna assume you have the access to triple DOT, that is Kafka, Highlands, as well as Black Swan. For the sustains though, you want to run E1 Huehua, you want to run E0 DHPT, it's kind of up to you. This one is not gonna be that important, but I would say from strictly a damage perspective, if you can sustain, I will run this. Right, especially if you have the E1 Huehua, speed buff, energy regeneration, attack buff, this is going to be a little bit more significant. But if you have heard of the Huehua sustained horror stories, you could just go for a safer route to go for the DHPT. From the DOT perspective, I think we can't really disagree that much because DOT is very, very straightforward, right? You get this thing called the E1 High Silence right here. Right here, right? So this is your number one objective. And then following E1 High Silence, you immediately get yourself the S1 High Silence, right? So this is gonna be a very, very good priority. Then you're gonna be getting yourself the E1 Black Swan, followed by the E1 Kafka. Then I think at this baseline, you have got yourself the 4-cost upgrade. If you want to go for a little bit more, I personally don't really know when are they gonna be able to rerun your light cones, specifically Black Swan's S1 or Jiao Qiu's S1. I would say though, this coming back is a little bit questionable because Jiao Qiu as a unit is just a little bit questionable. Unless they say, okay, you know what, we're gonna rerun Jiao Qiu in 4.3, which I really just don't really think is gonna be able to happen because there's this other Nihility unit coming out. So like, imagine if the other Nihility unit also have like a really, really good S1. You get what I'm saying? So I would say between both S1 Jiao Qiu as well as S1 Black Swan, it depends on whoever you want to go for more. I would say that S1 Jiao Qiu is going to be able to do a little bit more, but it's not really going to be the end of the world if you do want to go for that and don't want to wait for anymore. Where the hell is Black Swan again? Thank you, butter bitch. Alright, so these are gonna be your DOT Eidolon invest. Okay, you know what? I'll cap out at 6. Like, I don't want to make the list at too long. This will be a very... Okay, you might say this better. My counterpoint is, this is cheaper, guys. Statistically, this is cheaper. Can you think about a free-to-place? Oh, you can't think about a free-to-place? I think about a free-to-place, right? So because this is cheaper, I will just get this. Bada boom, bada bing. If you want to go for your sustained cost investments, cost maxing, whereas E1 is free. So if you want to go for the speed buff, feel free to do so. If you get the pun. But I would say though, if they were to plan out like a DOT sustain, as in a sustain that can also deal DOT damage, Hero will be very, very quickly replaced. So this one is going to be a little bit more up in the air, depending on if we're going to be getting more DOT support or rather focus from Dawei in version 4. If we have no more DOT focus in version 4, then I think Huanwen can be a good enough unit to use for a long perspective of time, right? So with that being done, we are now going to move on into one of the most interesting units of all time. Huge asterisk though. Huge asterisk. For Acheron specifically, no leakers. For Acheron specifically, we do have a potential unit that might be able to scale like really, really well with Acheron. I genuinely do not look at leaks, but I'ma keep it above. Right, let's just come into our Acheron team right now. This is our state, right? I'm gonna assume you start off at E0, of course, but the reason why I don't have anyone in Acheron's team is because Acheron's team placement changes a lot if you have Acheron's E2. But getting Acheron's E2 is actually not that much of a priority if, let's just say, for example, another unit that comes out can fulfill a much higher damage amplification while remaining Acheron at E0. So with that being established, no leakers whatsoever, right? No leakers whatsoever. Let's just get ourselves a Blade. Alright, let's just get ourselves a Blade. I think that would be a very, 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 very interesting choice, if I can say so myself. After you are able to get yourself the Blade, I'ma keep it about, you might want to get yourself another Blade. Alright, I'ma just keep it about. So that should be around the cost maxing perspective with regards to cost maxing, right? Why is that the case? So basically, what is the reason is none of your fucking business, MrPokke auto, right? So assuming that you got yourself Blade, right? Assuming you got yourself Blade, so let's just do a quick little thingy over here. Let's get this. And okay. From this point, if you have secured the Blade, alright, I would say that DHPT as a sustain is going to be viable if you got yourself an E2 Silver Wolf. But E2 Silver Wolf is a really, really expensive cost upgrade. That's literally 3 costs. And you can lose your 50/50s to Silver Wolf. So you might have gotten your E2 Silver Wolf for free. by chasing another unit, or you might need to spend pools for Seele, but personally, I would just never ever spend limited pools for a unit that can come by when you lose 50-50. So I'm just gonna assume that you do not have access to E2 Seele. Therefore, bro is gonna get benched. Wait, how do I bench, bro? There we go. So if you're going to be benching E2 Seele, which means your DHPD Dragon is not going to be doing any follow-up attack debuffs, then you're just going to be running your E0 S1 Hyacinth. Because this is pretty much the only other sustain that can consistently give you one more stack per basic, per ultimate, per little Ega. So that's going to be that. For this last slot over here, I'm going to keep it about, do you really think Jiao Qiu is going to give us a better utility than Car? Theoretically speaking, I mean, I don't look at leaks, right? I don't look at leaks. Theoretically speaking, Car is gonna be able to help you scale more from a true damage perspective, as well as defense down stacking. But, if you have yourself an E2 Acheron, this slot can frankly just be replaced with what I call the Teep. Right, the tip over here. But I would say that having the lack of access to the multiplier is gonna be a little bit more sus. So out of all these cost investments, right, I think number one is if you were to run your Hyacinth as one, this is what enables Hyacinth to get her debuffs in the first place. Because if you have no debuffs on Hyacinth, you can't justify using Hyacinth. So this S1 is just really, really important with Acheron. Number two, it's honestly up to you if you want to go for E2 Acheron, but I would say that it is probably more cost efficient to go back in for the Car instead of committing 2 more for the E2 Acheron. And the reason why we're not using Welt in slot 3, right, is because if you were to use Welt in slot 3, you basically kind of want bros E4. I don't know how accessible is an E4 Welt Yang with everyone in their mums. And second of all, I am extremely concerned with the amount of skill points that we can give to this team, because Welt Yang is straight up a skill point sucking machine. The moment you don't run Welt Yang with a unit like Sparkle or straight up pure basic attack, he instantly runs skill points. So you could run basic on Hyacinth, but if you run basic on Hyacinth and Hyacinth runs off energy, you're cooked. So can your Welt use your tutorial S5 with your E4 and defense down to do a perma basic attack bot and generate debuffs? Alright, so that is gonna be that. I will just place this as Car to be a little bit more well, why Blade? That is gonna be that. So to kind of wrap up my rambling a little bit, generally, I would say this is gonna be quite nice. This is gonna be quite nice. And E1 Car is honestly also really nice. But between E1 Car and E1 T, it is a little bit more of a toss-up as to which one you want to run for. Of course, if they were to ever go for like a, what you call it, Nova Flare for Jiao Qiu, that could also be another option, but I don't really want to go too deep down into it. I would say though, no matter what nihility support you have, this is a really, really good S1. And as a matter of fact, I would say this S1 is probably going to be wrong here. 24% defense down, additional speed. So if you're not going to be running Car, you could still give this to any other nihility supports. So this will be slightly more. And then these two, you kind of just toss up between one another, right? Again, no leakers. I don't know why you're saying Ashveil, because I don't know what I was going to go. Acheron S1. Wait, did I forget? Fuck. Yo, editor, add this in. Let's get this, right? Yep, Acheron S1 is more important than Acheron E2, right? Emergency hotfix. All right, thank you. Let's move on into the next DPS, which is going to be Firefly. Give me 1 second here. Firefly team. Now, as someone that pretty much has one of the most, or rather, most love for Firefly because she is basically my favorite unit, right? I would say with the experience of the power of girlfriend, this team is pretty much the most casual friendly team that you can think of. Alright, if you want to be a filthy fucking elitist, killing Lingsha, getting in either HMC or Run Mei, feel free. But I do want to kill this for more players who are thinking of being a little bit more casual in that regard. But frankly speaking, I would say Firefly's eidolon, or rather COSTMAXXING, is super straightforward. Alright, so we are just gonna instantly get ourselves the E1 into E2 Firefly. This is not really up for debate. Highest damage increase, highest cost investments. This will be your #1 priority before you think about anyone else. From this point on, I would say it is gonna be more so of a toss-up between your S1 Dahlia as well as your E1 Dahlia. They are both really good, to the point where I would prioritize them before getting Firefly's personal S1, because Dahlia's damage amplification is honestly very substantial. I wish I could make this like a little bit easier to group. So let me drag this here, as well as, holy shit bro, there's too many things bro. Alright, between E1 and S1, the way that I would decide is, if you want to risk a little bit more boost, I'll get an E1. Because it is fixed toughness bar damage, so if we have toughness bar inflation, this even will scale more. If you want to be a little bit more cost efficient, damage taken increase from break is also a very nice tool that you can get. So I will get these two first, and then for the Firefly S1, this is pretty much gonna be either this or Phainon S1. So it depends on which one do you prefer. Sometimes elitists from the Firefly community will just run Phainon's S1 to hit the respective speed thresholds, which will make it not beatable by your S1 Firefly, since you don't gain any other additional speed. But I'm just going to assume that you're not an elitist, so we'll just get ourselves the S1 Firefly right here. Then that is when you can start working towards your E1 as well as E2 Fugue, which I am absolutely blind because there are so many goddamn units in HSR God Real. E1 into your E2 Fugue. That is not Fugue. E2 Fugue. Alright, so this is where I would say it is a good enough cost investment. You can pretty much beat every single content. The reason why we're not going to invest a lot of cost towards the Lingsha is because at this cost investment, right? Okay, I'm not even being an elitist. If you have E2 Firefly, E1 S1 Dahlia, E2 Fugue, you genuinely don't need Assassin. Because the problem with most Firefly mains trying to run Sustainless is that they die and they don't do enough damage. But if you've already invested that much cost in the Firefly, this slot is very flexible. So I'm not going to recommend any true Firefly mains to invest in E1 Lingsha, even though it's pretty good, right? E1 Lingsha is pretty good, but you could just run HMC, run Mei, E1 run Mei. The free option is definitely going to be HMC with S5 DDD, but you might think that it's better since it's like COSTMAXXING, because it is free. Since the topic of this video is going to be COSTMAXXING, I would just recommend you guys at this cost investment, go for the S5 DDD plus HMC, right? So that's our Firefly team. For your Rappa as well as Boothill, I'm going to keep it a buck. There's not a very big difference between either this or this, because at the end of the day, both Dahlia and Fugue are very widely used for any break DPS. Your Dahlia slot is pretty much almost non-negotiable. Same thing for Fugue to get your extra toughness, which also helps Boothill get his pocket trick shot, and Rappa gets her the additional toughness bar stacking. Sustain slot, generally speaking, is still going to be Lingsha, so I won't really touch too much on this team. But assuming that you are going to be going for either Rappa or Boothill, I would get their respective E1s. Alright, so if you're gonna be a Boothill main, you'll get your E1 Boothill. If you're gonna be a Rappa main, you will get your E1 Rappa. I would say between both, the S1 Rappa is gonna be a little bit more important than the S1 Boothill, but generally for both units at the same time, you are gonna be getting them anyways. So E1 S1 is the stopping point for your 2-break DPS, and then everything else after, it is gonna follow the same methodology, right? Something like this. So if this makes sense, then that is fantastic. But if this does not make sense, then you must make sense of it yourself, if I can say so myself. Now, moving on into the greatest DPS of all time, and that is going to be none other wife, right? This is in fact the as I was saying, this is in fact the greatest DPS of all time, featuring Feixiao and her fuck buddies, Ashveil, Bobbin, as well as DHPT. If you want to be an elitist, this is gonna be a more flexible slot over there, a little bit similar to the Firefly situation. So I would say the number one thing you're gonna be able to get as a Feixiao main, it is without a shadow of the doubt, where the hell is my wife? And there she is. And there she is, all right? Let's just be so for real right now, right? Let's just be so for real right now. It is going to be your E2 Feixiao. Opens up the option for 4-piece Eagle, opens up the option for additional stack generation from Ashveil, Bobbin, as well as DHPT. This will be the number one priority, way more than anything else otherwise tells you. After you get yourself the E2 Feixiao, which is the best DPS in the entire planet, then you can think about getting your E1 Ashveil, right? E1 Ashveil is gonna be a significant damage upgrade. The reason why you want to get this E1 Ashveil before Feixiao's S1 is mainly because Feixiao with cruising in the Stellar Sea is worse than Feixiao with an E1 Ashveil with the cruising Anaxas. That's it, right? No. Feixiao with S1 plus E0 Ashveil is worse than Feixiao with cruising plus E1 Ashveil, right? So this will be your next cost investment upgrade. Whether or not you want to get yourself the S1 Ashveil, S1 Topaz, or S1 Feixiao, it frankly speaking depends on your personal preference. As of right now, we currently do have the Feixiao banner, and I'm gonna keep it at about 54% defense ignore. It's fucking 54% defense ignore. If anybody wants to fight me on 54% defense ignore, I will physically go over there and show you my rage, if I can say so myself, right? So after we get ourselves the S1 Feixiao, that is when we can then finally go forward into the S1 Ashveil. Now, because we are talking about COSTMAXXING, right? Since you want to COSTMAX, I would also want to just quickly make a huge shout out to this little mechanic that I love as a personal COSTMAXer, and that is this thing called the Stellar Convergence, right? As a true COSTMAXer, you can COSTMAX your team even further by redeeming a free copy of Worrisome Blissful to truly COSTMAX. Now, do you need a battle pass for this? It is gonna be, but if you don't really want to worry about this COSTMAXing thing because you do not want to waste that, then just go ahead and get yourself the Ashveil S1. My point is, I will not spend pools for Topaz S1, but if I cannot get Topaz S1, I will get myself the S1 Ashveil, right? So from this perspective onwards, that is when you can start looking into your bobbins. And now, I'm gonna keep it a buck. I think we can all agree that this is redeemable, right? Like, this is a redeemable eidolon, and this is also a redeemable eidolon. The reason why I say these two will have the lowest priority and that they are redeemable is because if you were a Feixiao main, right? If you wanted to COSTMAX as a Feixiao player, are you really gonna spend pools on a Bobbin rerun? Probably not, right? You're probably gonna be, as a COSTMAXer, getting your gold coins into a Bobbin Eidolon E1 as well as E2. So frankly speaking, just for Feixiao, if you wanted to COSTMAX, I will just get a holding, right? I'll just get a whole shebang because Feixiao deserves nothing but the best. And in fact, this is the only other Eidolon that you're gonna be able to COSTMAX essentially for the highest benefit without necessarily spending any other strategies, guys. I did not say this was free, guys. I did not say this was free, right? I said that they are redeemable, all right? Right now, to my understanding from my very helpful community, that the free-to-play player base can only get 3. Because they all got 3, right? So these 4, you can just get them in overtime. All right, there's no rush, right? There's no rush. So that is pretty much going to be that for Bobbin. If you want to think about your additional eidolon for your DHPT, you could get this E1 for the skill point recovery because Feixiao and Ashveil, technically, they do consume quite a bit of skill points. So if you get the E1 DHPT, it does help a bit, especially with the 18% res pen. And you can work your way up towards the E2 DHPT. So I will get these two with my Stellar Jades first, and then redeem my Bobbin over time. So that is how you truly COSTMAX with Feixiao. And to put it for reals, because previously when I was playing HSR, I was trying to make sure that my account has no eidolons. except for this, right? Going forward, the first thing I'm gonna be pulling on my own team in my strongest DPS team in the entire world is going to be investing in an E1 Ashveil. That is what is my first priority right now. But the only reason why I didn't get this is number one, I was being relatable. And number two, I think I was a little bit addicted to Evernight's Enter when this guy came out. So I didn't want to do it. So with that team out of the way, okay, Firefly is really done, right? We can then move on into the next team, which is going to be going into our version 3 team comp. And that is none other than the Herta, guys. That the true blue version 3 potential women with Anaxa, Tribi, as well as DHPT. I think this is honestly a very, 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 very easy. Oh, wait. Fuck. Where did she go? Come here, right? For 1 cost, boom, done. E1 Tribi, right? Then your next best update, definitely working your way up towards the E2D Herta. But before you get your E2D Herta, I would say getting this S1 is gonna be a little bit more important because of the skill point refund as well as the additional crit rate, which will make us building a lot easier. You could also do this. So if you want to instantly dump 2 costs before the E1 Tribi and the S1 Herta, nowadays, you could do this as well. But based on a step-by-step basis, you will just do this following this method right here. Then after you get yourself E1 Tribi with DDD, E2 S1 Herta, this slot for Anaxa is honestly a little bit more questionable because, like I mentioned, I'm a little bit more allergic to investing in cost for a unit that might not see that big of a potential going forward. So the issue that I have with Anaxa right now is that as a sub DPS, he is not really performing his roles as well for the great Madam Herta. So if we do have a version 4 Evolution or even version 5 Evolution, the first unit that I'm going to be kicking out is going to be Anaxa rather than Tribi, because Tribi, especially at E1, you have team-wide energy regenerate, not team-wide energy, you have team-wide DDD, you have free outs, free energy for her when your whole team is going to be Evolution targeting, and then this slot, after taking out Anaxa, you could have an Evolution DPS that can do Bro's role better, either with more utility, more damage, or more team-wide synergy. Okay, for example, right now, in pure fiction, people are already not running Anaxa and using baby Herta instead, but we still need Tribi. Right, so for that, I wouldn't say going for too many costs on Anaxa is going to be worth it unless you are a Anaxa main DPS. Right, then that is going to be a topic for another later part of the video. Then for DHPT is all right here, this is going to be the same. I would say E1 DHPT into the eventual S1 can be considered, but I personally just really don't like this S1. I personally don't really prefer getting this S1 because if I can just go from E1 to 1 more cost to COSTMAX, I will just get this. Maximum COSTMAX. And if you really want the 1 more cost later on towards the end, then I'll get this S1 to round things up. Right, these 2 should be your next best priority. Wait for the next evolution. If it's gonna come out, then that will be the best investment for the Herta. Now moving on to the next team, and that's our big sister, or rather big girl. Is Aglaea sister? Not really, right? So this is gonna be Big Aglaea featuring Aglaea, Cyrene, DHPT, as well as Tribi. For the Aglaea team, frankly speaking, it is a little bit more flexible. So for example, your Tribi slot can frankly be replaced by Sunday. It is still gonna be completely fine. It is okay. The reason why I'm gonna be a little bit more skeptical for Sunday is, what if Sunday doesn't get a Nova Flare? Because I can already see E1 Tribi out DPSing the Sunday setup. So in the future, especially if you were to go for the cost investment in an Aglaea perspective, you are gonna focus on getting the E1 S1 Aglaea and immediately jump to E2 Cyrene. Immediately. So if you do go by this route, you are not really gonna be mixing out too much on the lack of stacks. But if you want to talk about additional action values, right? Additional true damage. No one else really does Bro's role better. And you can also take out your E2 Cyrene and E1 Tribi to form the Mimo slot wheelchair. Or rather the Cyrene slot wheelchair, right? So with that being established, first things first is definitely gonna be our E1 S1 Aglaea. So we'll first get our E1 because this is absolutely fucking insane. And then we'll next get our S1 because this is absolutely fucking insane. Then immediately jump into your E2 Cyrene. Fuck the light cone, all in E2 Cyrene if you want to get the fastest possible clear. Okay, and also I'm just keeping it a buck. If you played E2 Cyrene, you genuinely play a different Honkai scenario. Like, ever since I opened my E2 Cyrene, I literally can slot bro in every fucking team in this game because team white 100% energy is literally just fucking broken. So get this into this. If you do want to get yourself Triby, get your E1 Triby first. If you still want to use Sunday because you put Sunday back in those days, you can definitely slot in that E1 Sunday for the additional defense ignore because you are definitely going to be running DHPT with Aglaea. Where is Sunday? Where is Sunday? Thank you, Sunday. Get this but a bitch right in there. Alright, so from this point on, I really wouldn't think too much about the S1 Sunday before the E1 DHPT. COSTMAXXING. Right, COSTMAXXING. So after you get E1 Sunday, E1 S0, then get DHPT's E1 first for res pen and skill points, then get Sunday's S1 if you want to get a little bit more effective with your skills. But again, like I mentioned, you know, if you do want to stick with the E1 S0 Triby, you basically save one cost because you don't really need to get yourself the Triby S1 by that much. So we'll leave this over here. Is my Sunday still E0? You think? You think? So that's gonna be our Aglaea COSTMAXXING guide. Very, very good. Also, heads up for the rest of our Amphorius team comps right here. You are gonna see a lot of E2 Cyrenes. So, yep. Before we get on to Mimo Slop, and that is gonna be our next team, none other than Mr. Mydei. Frankly speaking, Mydei's team building is a little bit unique because out of all of the sustainless version 3 team comps, if you have access to an E2 Cyrene, just like how I said for E2 Firefly, high cost Firefly teams, running Mydei sustainless is very, very doable. Why? Why? Take a look, alright? What is bro's HP? That's 9,000 HP. What's bro's HP? That's 5,000 HP. What's bro's HP? That's 5.2k HP. So Mydei's team as a whole, think of him as like a top laner, right? Bro is like Darius, bro. You already give him Warmogs into like Sterak's Gauge. He is not really generally as squishy as compared to a lot of attack scaling DPS. And the moment you get to that point of the E1 S1 Mydei into E2 Cyrene, the sustain slot becomes a lot more flexible. So I won't really talk too much about the Hyacinth slot right here. So let's just jump into Mydei himself. And that is definitely gonna be our E1 Mydei into our S1 Mydei. And then this will basically follow the same concept as Cyrene, where you just all in E2 Cyrene, right? For the next 2 costs, just focus on E2 Cyrene, and then you are gonna be done here. After you get yourself the E2 Cyrene, get that E1 tip, right? You can get an E1 tip. So when you unlock this E1 tip, you have 3 options. Option number 1, you can go for the Hyacinth, right? You can go for the full casual experience, fun button engage. You never have to worry about ending ever again. Get a Hyacinth, you're done. Option number 2, you can take out Hyacinth and run this thing called the Ceridra swapback. Because for Ceridra, you can actually duplicate Mydei's Godslayer for absurd amount of damage, which is honestly really, really good. Option number 3, I personally don't really like running this more than Ceridra because you could face into damage downtime because duplicate a Godslayer with the Cyrene buff on Ceridra is crazy good. But if you don't want to, you could go for the RM. Where's RMC? You could go for this setup as well, which in a COSTMAXXer's perspective, this is the best way to COSTMAXX. Because you don't have to get yourself the Ceridra over there, right? In order to do the highest possible amount of damage, you could then just go with the Ceridra option instead. So I will leave that up to you guys, but generally as a Mydei main, your priority should be these right here. So very, very similar to Aglaea, except that he doesn't really need sustain as much as Aglaea because bro is a beefy dude. With that being established, we can finally get on to the main, not really main, but like one of the most important questions you are wondering as a Mimo slot player. What is the best cost investments for the Mimo slot team featuring Castorice, Evernight, Cyrene, as well as Hyacinth? Very, very simple for a Mimo slop team, right? Number one, you don't really have a lot of leeway to change out your different team comps because this is fixed as is. There might be another argument where you can take out your Evernight, or rather take out your Castorice, or in E2 Evernight, slap on an E1 Tribi or even RMC. You might be able to compete sustainers because Evernight might not need sustain, but I will keep this for most Mimo slot players to run your Castorice with Evernight. So with that being established, here is gonna be your COSTMAXXING guide for Mimo slot. Number one is gonna be none other than your E1 Evernight without a shadow of a goddamn doubt. Thank you, E1 Evernight. After you get yourself the E1 Evernight, the very next that we're gonna be going for is gonna be that. Where the hell, babe? Thank you, right? As one Evernight. And then, okay, if you have a little bit more to spare, right, go for the E1 Hyacinth. If you have a little bit more spare. If you do not have enough to spare, get an S1 Evernight first. Because the reason why I want to get E1 Hyacinth is because we can eventually then build into our E2 Hyacinth, which is right here, right here for the E2 Hyacinth. And then you can, wait, where's Hyacinth's S1? Pull me down Hyacinth's S1. Okay, I would say this is probably a more realistic way to go about it, but if you can endure not using Hyacinth's S1 for a while and use the pink Mimi light cone, you can do something like this. So working towards E2 S0, then slotting in the E2 S1, then you can work towards the S1 Castorice first. S1 Castorice. S1. Actually, I literally just realized I completely forgot about the strongest DPS idol in the entire, or one of the strongest anyways. That's my bad, guys. That's my bad, right? Oh, it is way better. Okay, then you can work towards your Castorice S1. Alright? Get that Castorice S1. Get that Castorice E1. Alright, then get your Castorice E2. And then from here, you can get your Cyrene S1. Alright, Cyrene S1. And then eventually the Cyrene E1 and then the Cyrene E2. Something like this, right? Something like this. I would say towards the end over here, you're not going to feel that big of a difference anymore because by this point of investment, you might start wondering, MrPokke, why not do I just kill Castorice and run an E2 Evernight main DPS? To which I will say, yes, you can. Because this is the trick in a true Mimo slot player. You can, in fact, kill Castorice by first investing in Evernight and Hyacinth, then slot in E1 Tribi, and that is the twist for COSTMAXXING, guys, right? Because at this point of investment, when you got yourself the E2 S1, the requirement for another 4 cost Castorice is smoke and mirrors, bro. It's a juke. It is an agenda posted by the Mimo slot players to waste 4 costs for E2 S1 Castorice when you can in fact be the literal god amongst men by doing this. Look at how many costs you save with that. If you were to think as a Castorice main, this is gonna hurt your feelings, I am sorry, but this is a COSTMAXXING video, so we are gonna leave it off at that, and hopefully you guys can have a much more enjoyable Mimo slot experience, right? So with that out of the way, they are just gonna move on into the next team for version 3, and that is Mr. Phainon Castellana, bro. Come on right now. Okay, the reason why I got myself a Mimi, right? And I did say we want to cater this to the sustainless, or rather the casual player base, right? Casual player base. Your number one objective as a Phainon main is to get this thing called Ice and Elation, followed by, oh wait, I yoinked the S1 out there. Yeah, I yoink. I don't know, I yoinked it, right? Alright, right here. Alright. So this is essentially your number one objective, assuming you already secure yourselves Phainon, Ceridra, free Sparkle, and then this is gonna be DHPD, right? This is gonna be DHPD, right? So this will be your start for now. And the reason why you do not have Cyrene is because if you run this team with Cyrene and a sustain, have fun waiting 20 billion years before you get ultimate up, this will give you a easier experience, especially at full E0. But the moment you unlock your E2 S1 Phainon, the requirement of running DHPD goes down substantially. Then you can COSTMAX, run in RMC, get in the freeze against the enemy targets, and you should face almost like zero issues playing this as a sustainers. If you do not want to run RMC, feel free to also slot in your Sundays, because this is gonna be able to, at this point, right, as long as you have your E2 S1 Phainon plus Ceridra, these two slots are really a lot more flexible. I would say Sparkle has a higher priority than Sunday, especially if you want to COSTMAX and get E1 to E2 Sparkle, but at an E0 baseline, they're all very similar, right? So after you get yourself the E2 S1 Phainon, in terms of highest damage amplification, your first step is going to be getting yourself that E1 Ceridra, because you do gain access to additional defense ignore duplicated to 36%, which scales very well with your S1. Getting this, then after you get your E1 Ceridra, you can then work towards your E1 S1 Ceridra for the highest damage increase. Now from this point onwards, you have two options. Option A, all in, get E2 Cyrene. This is like for the gamers who can commit immediately 3 cost Chibu, or rather 2 cost Chibu, and then this team will pretty much be one of, if not the best Phainon teams available right now. If you do not want to care about the E2 Cyrene and you want to like slow things down a little bit for like a slower tempo, you can then work towards, like, for example, your E1 Sparkle or your E1 Sunday right here, right? I would say personally, I would prefer getting myself E1 Sparkle into an E2 Sparkle, because this is gonna allow you to hit 30% defense ignore, combined with 36% defense ignore on Ceridra into Phainon's 20%, you are gonna be close to 100% defense ignore on the E2, right? So from there on, this Phainon, or rather Sunday E1, will fill up the gap, and then that will be pretty much the option if you do not want to go for E2 Cyrene. If you do go for E2 Cyrene, you can ignore these parts first, and then work your way back like this. Right, something like this for the highest possible Phainon damage. I would say for Phainon specifically, he might not have a very fixed slot 3 and 4, depending on how future version 4 units are gonna be like. So if we have like more harmony units, more buffers that can like compete with these harmony supports, then this guy's team building will change by then. But your number one objective before, because we don't live in the what ifs, right? We live in the now. Now secure E2 S1 Phainon into E1 S1 Ceridra, and then think about the other things, right? So that is gonna be there for Phainon's COSTMAXXING guy. Now the next unit before we move on into free is going to be Mr. Anaxa. I just realized Mr. Anaxa's team is literally Phainon's team. This will be for my Anaxa mains that want to use Anaxa as a main DPS, right? Purely from a main DPS perspective, I would say the number one priority with your main DPS Anaxa is honestly E2 Cyrene. It will drastically improve the timing to get the ultimate state, because the reason why Anaxa works so well with Cyrene is because she reduces your Ceridra stacks from 6 stacks to 5 stacks, because you get +1 for free. Then after you get into that state faster, you gain the additional action value advance by pulling up Anaxa effectively along your E2 Cyrene to act as bro's Sunday. Alright, that is why E2 Cyrene is the most important upgrade to get for bro, and frankly speaking, bro's E1 and S1, it is not as significant, right? E0, S0, Anaxa, without it, it is okay, because at most, just getting a little bit more defense down. The skill one is kind of whatever. This is just great, a little bit more res pen. So for 2 costs, number 1 is definitely your E2 Cyrene. From here, in terms of highest damage increase, I honestly would just go myself for the E1 Ceridra. Then consider getting the E1 Anaxa, because you can stack on your defense down, right? Our objective for any defense down unit is to always stack on defense down. After you get both of the E1s, there is when you can consider Anaxa's S1 for a little bit more energy regeneration, so you don't face the downtime. And then if you really want to get to the big boys and be completely element neutral, you can then get the additional 20% rest. But at that point, you are gonna be essentially a very good position to get a little bit more E1 from DHPT, right? Where is the E1? Cause like, bro, there's so many units I can't really keep up. So you could go for the E1 DHPD for 18% rest, cause this is 20%. Which means that it is technically a little bit more, but you get one more skill point back with DHPD's E1. But because you already got yourself the E1 and rather S1, or rather, you got yourself the S1 Anaxa, this skill point with Anaxa is not going to be super down bad. And then eventually, I really wouldn't get this, just because I don't think you should be facing that big of a sustained issue with a E2 Cyrene. If you really want more damage, go for the E2 DHPD to just run up the entire Anaxa main DPS team, right? Okay, we have one last team for our version 3 DPS, and that is actually the same fucking team, because all you need to do is take a bro out. Okay, actually, it's not really the same team. All right, you know what? I misspoke. Because we technically really want Sparkle, right? This is essentially your free team, right? The quote-unquote free team. But instead of that, if you don't have Trippy, you want to run RMC, that is basically free slop, right? Number one, investments for your E1 Archer. Did I spoil my answer? I did, right? Because the number one investment for E1 Archer team is going to be E1 Archer. Absolutely exceptional. Now, I actually would not ever spend pools for this, so if you didn't get this for free, it is really unfortunate. But if you were an Archer main back then, you should have instantly put for E1 Archer, right? I feel like that is a very logical point. If you were a Archer main and you wanted to play Archer, you would probably have committed for an E1 Archer first, in which by that process you would have gotten his S1, right? So if you do not have access to his S1, it is not that much of a priority, mainly because you can run Cruising in the Stellar Sea or Swordplay, depending on which you prefer. A more important damage increase is unironically going to be working your way up towards your E2 Sparkle right here. Because for most defense stacking units, you want to get to that 100% as fast as possible. Then if you can get yourself E1 Trippy, that's great. But if you do not want to run E1 Trippy, you can even consider running Car or Silver Wolf to get even more defense down to 100%. Alright, but I'm not exact, because if you use Silver Wolf, I'm pretty sure you will overcap with E2 Sparkle, so I probably wouldn't go there. So Car giving you the additional true damage is gonna be a very decent upgrade. But if you just want a little bit more general purpose, E1 Trippy right here, get the S1 Archer, and then this is pretty much gonna be more than sufficient. The benefits of a E1 Archer is that you don't really need as many cost investments as compared to a lot of the other things over here. So keeping this guy at low cost is gonna be able to get a job done. Actually, you know what? I'll put this here more, just because you get a +1 skill point, which is really important. Yes, right? So that's gonna be our free team. If you ever want to run a sustainless team, right? Let me introduce you to E2.
The greatest unrelated.
Okay, bro, I swear, E2 Cyrene changes everything, bro. Because the beauty of running E2 Cyrene here, right, is that you notice something. Sparkle can, in fact, pull up Cyrene. Unlike Bomb Day. Because this is a 50% AV advance for any unit, inclusive of Cyrene. If you have not tried this team yet, I highly recommend you guys try it. It is very interesting on how it goes up. So with that, we have come to the end of every single version 3 teams. Any objections before we move on into version 4? Oh, it's Sunday? Alright, chat. Okay, chat, I misspoke, right? Your adder cropped out. I misspoke. I did in fact mean Sunday can pull up, because I did in fact misspeak, right? I misspoke, alright? I misspoke. Do we want to go Saber or do we want to go version 4? So this is going to be our Saber team. I'ma keep it a buck. It is going to be right here, guys. Okay, I'm so sorry, but it's just facts, bro. Right? I'm so, but at the end of the day, this is just facts, right? Team-wide energy regeneration for an energy-based unit for 2 costs. This is pretty much the most important idle investments. So just get your E2 Cyrene. Stop asking me why this shit is so broken, because it just is. Then get your S1 Saber. Very good. And I'ma keep it a buck. Sparkle at E2 deals more damage than E1 Sunday, but E1 Sunday is gonna be more effective cost-wise. And because I am not a tourist, I know that Sunday can actually pull up Cyrene. I wouldn't really mind going for the E1 Sunday to get ourselves the maximum benefits for the action value advance. Where is my E1 Sunday? Right, because I'm not a tourist, right, you'll get yourself the E1 Sunday for additional defense down, pulling up Cyrene as we speak. Then get yourself the additional, either you can go for the S1 Sunday, or you could even go for the E1 DHPD for a little bit more skill point recovery and team-wide rest pen. I, once again, wouldn't really go for the S1 DHPD because you don't really face too much skill point issues, especially with Saber, so that's gonna be chill over there. And then for our future prosperities with Saber, right, I don't think they will completely abandon Saber, and the moment they have another energy regeneration support, we might see Sunday being a little bit more homeless, but it is not going to impact you that much because you already got yourself the E2 Cyrene, right? So that's pretty much going to be that for our Saber, vertical investments, COSTMAXXING. And finally, okay, before we talk about Elation Slot, right? Before we talk about Elation Slot, just really quickly, I want to address this really quickly, which is this thing called Ashveil main DPS. If you want to play Ashveil main DPS, I would save a little bit of cost, specifically for Ashveil, and you don't play Feixiao, because his kit is fundamentally designed to be a sub DPS. Whether or not you want to play him as a main DPS or a sub DPS, you cannot ignore the fact that his kit was built for a sub DPS. And the reason why his sub DPS performance is worse than his main DPS is because Feixiao is unfortunately not able to scale that well as a unit without no offlet, right? Objective, no rage bait, right? I'm being for real. So if you do main DPS Ashveil, I would really think that going forward in the future, while you use this for now, it can go away very fast, where whoever this brand new main DPS is will come into this slot and Ashveil becomes a sub DPS. Then your Tribi slot can be either Babin or Tribi, depending on which you want. Then the cost investment upgrades, it will mainly depend on what is that main DPS going to require. Until I see that main DPS follow-up, I'm not going to comment too much for main DPS Ashveil. Just know that as an Ashveil main, you should be prepared to see what that main DPS is going to be. So, with that being established, I am now going to move on into our final segment, and that is the Elation Slot. Alright, we are going to do Silver Wolf first, guys, right? We are a very objective there. So, Sparxie main DPS. Okay, the reason why I'm not going to roll as a Sparxie main DPS is the same reason as I'm thinking of Ashveil. Because if you think about it, right, the biggest cost investment for your Sparxie main DPS, assuming you play Sparxie main DPS, you give her E2 S1 Sparxie, at that point, you are just gonna chug with Silver Wolf. Because Silver Wolf is gonna make use of Sparxie. In a weird way, a Sparxie main DPS's best sub DPS is Silver Wolf, because Silver Wolf can make use of E2 Sparxie's additional punch knights, right? So I will just use this as a Sparxie plus Silver Wolf upgrade. We are just gonna, where the hell is, there we go, right? We're just gonna use, what the fuck? I am absolutely speechless. So I guess Hui is just not a unit, huh? You know what? Let's just do it like this then. Alright. So AI told me to not use Hui, and AI is never wrong. Sparxie, Silver Wolf, Yao Guang with the future Elation sustain, right? Let's do this row below. For Silver Wolf's vertical investment, it is gonna follow a very similar methodology, which is abusing the ever-living fuck out of the punchlines from this right here. We will be getting our E2 Silver Wolf level 999 first. This will be your #1 COSTMAXXING way. A little bit similar to getting the E2 Phainon. Now, I know a lot of you guys might be thinking, if you're a Silver Wolf, why the fuck would I get an E2 Silver Wolf when I can't even make use of Bro's benefits fully? The reason is because I am extremely confident when the Elation Sustain comes up, it will pretty much consolidate the entire Silver Wolf archetype. So the reason why we can't make this, I mean, you guys already know by now, is we can't hit the 240 consistently, right? But when we do get this, and it's a when and not if, it is definitely when, then this E2 Silver Wolf will have the highest amount of benefits because you are essentially getting 2 extra turns at maximum EBA multipliers when you are exceeding 120 hidden MMR, right? So I will first get myself the E2 Silver Wolf. For the E1, or rather the next cost upgrade, it is frankly a toss-up between your Elitist Yao Guang as well as the damage Yao Guang. If you were an elitist, this S1 is almost non-negotiable because you get yourself the additional speed as well as the 15 fixed energy per wave, so you get this to instantly cast Yao Guans out on the first action, and if you don't get this S1, there are no other replacements. But if you're strictly talking about a damage perspective, the E1 is actually going to be able to do more because Mushroom S5 is a very nice alternative. Check out our tier list video for a light cone. I don't really want to explain it too much. So I would say for general players, because this is not an elitist cost-maxing thing, I will get the E1 Yao Guang followed by the S1 after you get Silver Wolf's S1. Alright, I will get E1 Yao Guang first, then Silver Wolf S1, then Yao Guang S1, then eventually work your way up. Okay, actually, you know what? I take it back. There's another alternative, which is... Oh, you know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of Elation Slope. But E2 Sparxie is genuinely a fucking diabolical eidolon. So if you want to go through the route of Mimo Slop, you could theoretically push for this first. If you can save up instantly for an E2 Ezio, E2 Ezio, I will go this route. If you can't save all in for an E2 Sparxie, then go for this route, right? Slowly working your way up. Because this is by 1 cost, 1 cost, 1 cost intervals. For 2 cost intervals, I will get this E2, followed by this E2, and I'll squeeze in a Blair over here, in which at this point, you're probably gonna be wondering, MrPokke, what if I just run E2 S1 Sparxie as the main DPS, killing E2 Silver Wolf? You know what? I love Castorice and I love Silver Wolf. But since they both have a global passive, you must ask yourself, what will your morals do? That's all I'm gonna say. And then MrPokke with a beautiful poem, and then your final cost towards the end. I will just wait for my Elation Sustain and see what that upgrade is gonna be. I am not sure if there will be a Elation Sirene, because that is purely speculation. So if you are going to be someone that don't want to speculate, and you know for a fact you're locked into Silver Wolf, Sparxie, as well as like this, right? And you don't know if you want to run the Yao Guang as slot 3, because there might be an Elation Sustain. You could get these first. Alright, get these first. Actually, I'll put this a little bit, right? I'll get these first, then get Elation Sustain, and then see if your Yao Guang is gonna get replaced. So leave your Yao Guang at E0, S0 for as long as you can. If you know that Elation Sirene, if it ever comes, will not replace Yao Guang, then you're good to go, right? If it does replace Yao Guang, then you know, you can at least save these 2 costs while you maximize your E2 S1 Sparxie and E2 S1 Silver Wolf, right? So that is your Elation Slop Silver Wolf. Now, Elation Slop 2 Evanescia, it frankly follows a pretty similar methodology, except that this E1 is the number 1 priority, and as much as there is no Sparxicle for Evanescia, the Evanescia's E2 is gonna be a substantial damage increase as well. But to cost max a little bit better, I will get the S1 before her E2. And the reason being, you see full benefits of the S1 right now because it is energy regeneration, which ties back into your E1, whereas the E2, you're leaving a little bit of value on the table since we do not have our Elation 4 slot sustain, right? So by a rerun on Evanescia, when you have the Elation sustain, then you can get this E2 to utilize the maximum value from this particular item. Other than that, I personally would not go all in on Sparxie. just to see if they will release a Sparxie but for certified bangers. If what happened to, let's just say, my community members think that Evanescia is gonna be homeless, that way it's gonna abandon Evanescia, and they go by the route of like, for example, like Aglaea, right? Aglaea didn't have a dedicated sustain, or rather a support, then you could see if you want to get an E2 Sparxie, right? If she really does not have another dedicated support, then it is what it is. If she does, then save a little bit of cost for that dedicated support, as well as the eventual elation sustain. I know for a fact that Yao Guang is most likely going to be here as well, but it also once again ties back into whether or not the elation Cyrene, if it's going to be an elation Cyrene, will replace that role. Maybe there is no dedicated support for Evanescia like Ceridra, because Yao Guang is the dedicated support. Then you run elation Cyrene plus Yao Guang and elation sustain, forming your Evanescia flagship team, right? So I would say it is very, very safe to go for this route first, then save your cost to see what that last two is gonna be. But stopping at this point for Evanescia is also another reason why people are saying it is technically a little bit cheaper to play Evanescia, since Silver Wolf slot is gonna be more or less complete with Sparxie. Then eventually when we get the sustain and elation Cyrene, there will be another 8 more costs to form just like Mimo slot, right? So with that, we have come into the end of our cost maxing guide video. I've yapped on for 1 hour and 11 minutes. Let me know what you guys think. Okay, wait, before we wrap up, any violent objections? Any violent objections? Or is this an exceptional tier? Not even a tier list, an exceptional guide by an exceptional streamer. Looks good. Looks good. Thank you. What about Columbina? Let me know what you think in the comments below. I can't really screenshot this and post onto X because there are too many duplicate eidolons that are like shitting all over the place. So this will purely just be for a video. Word of the day is going to be elation slot or Mimo slot. Join Twitch, join YouTube, join Discord, join use code POGE for 10% of gamers up. All the best for your guided boost, and I'll see you guys next time.